There's a war coming, and nobody wants you to know about it. They want to have that moment on the mainstream media where they can interrupt a commercial and have a breaking news and have you go run to the TV and stare at it, having your brain kicked over into a fight or flight response, an emotional reaction, so that they can captivate you for the upcoming ads that they're going to have in between. And that's what they do. It's just, they know about all this. And it's going to happen, and it's on its way. So don't be surprised when it does. This country, Venezuela, used to be one of the wealthiest, most powerful countries down there. And the mainstream media would have you believe that it was as a result of socialism, as a result of communistic tendencies, or the desire to move toward Russia and China that caused the collapse of their society. If that's the case, why is China's society so powerful and wealthy and prosperous, if communism and socialism is really the problem? A lot of people can't answer that right away. They talk about the capitalistic elements that have entered into Chinese society, but they were powerful and successful long before they decided to incorporate those elements, and they haven't incorporated them into the government, that's for sure. These fool's errand sanctions that we have put on down there might have worked 25 years ago, but they don't work now. It's a bigger world. And unfortunately, when we decide that we want to make life hard for our neighbors, they're going to make life hard for us. The leadership in Venezuela is going to have an election, and the people who have tried to protest the guy and say that he's wrong, they aren't even going to participate because they know what's coming. They absolutely know what's coming. It's not going to be any more elections down there. There's just going to be war. And the U.S. knows it. This article came out just a couple days ago, and I want you to listen to their words. 1st Marine Division Commanding General Major General Eric Smith said earlier this month at the West 28 conference that all his training is now based on actual operational plans. Actual operational plans. A departure from previous training against notional adversaries that starts on the lower end of the warfare scale and works up to the range of military operations. All of our training scenarios are against a peer or near-peer competitor. They're all based on operational plans. There's an added incentive for the young Marine to go out and actually do training that has a real name. Not the Dakodians or whatever else. That's their fictitious terms that they've used for make-believe scenarios. The Marines are also including scenarios in their training events now that had been overlooked for nearly 2 decades. While the service was focused on a counterinsurgency and stability operations mission set, meaning now, instead of talking about and training soldiers and sailors and Marines to interdict third world and civilian forces, now they're talking about them going up against actual other soldiers with actual training in the same weapons or comparative weapons. We're trying to make sure the Marines are instilled with the confidence to be able to go against a peer competitor. Some of it as simple as air threats. We haven't had a bomb dropped on us in almost 70 years. You have to begin to prepare yourselves for an aviation threat, which we haven't faced since the 50s. We're doing that. Chemical, biological, radiological, nuclear response. We're preparing for that in a significant manner with the proliferation of chemical weapons. So the basics of putting that individual Marine in his MOP gear, MOP 4, gas mask, and entire suit, and leaving him there for 8, 10, 12 hours, that's something that hasn't been done for a while, but you have to do it. We used to do it all the time. We used to do it all the time. And like I said, I'm an old soldier back when the Army used to wear green and shine boots, but it's when you take this, they're not talking about North Korea here. They're not talking about boots on the ground in North Korea. They're talking about going nose to nose with the Russians or nose to nose with the Chinese. Now, I want you to look at this. This is what we covered 2 videos ago. Admiral Tidd. But more concerning is the Russians' sale of 3,000 surface-to-air weapons and 50 tanks to Nicaragua, and are in discussions with them over fighter aircraft sales. It also plans to carry out joint exercises with the Nicaraguan military. That's speaking of the Chinese and the Russians. Another example, China and Russia offers programs similar to the United States International Military Education and Training. Moscow has opened a facility in Nicaragua to bring the training there. Russia carrying on a very aggressive misinformation campaign in Central and South America. The Kremlin propping up the embattled regime of Nicolas Maduro in Venezuela, a country on the verge of economic collapse, has been largely for 2 years now. Moscow and Caracas agreed on a $15 billion oil and gas deal and the sale of fighter aircraft to the regime. This article here is one we didn't cover, and he talks about the threats that are coming and being able to work with Northcom. So this is going to be something where he's going to be working with the commands, the military commands that cover the continental United States. It's in here, basically the reason I brought it up was so that because Caracas pays close attention to what he says, especially following the current administrator's tweet on political oppression there, Tidd made clear, "I'm not planning an invasion." He said the neighbors' countries are watching developments in Venezuela very closely, and in the end they will have to come together to help to recover it. What he's basically saying here is that it isn't going to be the U.S. that fires the first shot in this. But going back to this other one, we started here. He makes a comment, and we covered this before. These are adaptive threat networks, and terrorist organizations such as the Islamic State could exploit these pathways into the United States. The Islamic State has had some success in recruiting foreign fighters from Trinidad and Tobago, but of more concern to Tidd and nations in the command was the radicalization taking place among people who do not leave, but intend to carry out terrorist attacks in their home country or against the United States. Trinidad and Tobago. Sorry about the blur there for a minute. Last night I did a quick little 8-minute video on a bomb that went off aboard a boat that they're telling you is just some mechanical failure. That teeny little spit of land right here, and I'm sorry about the blur. Right there above the arrow, that's Cozumel. Also, there you go. It was basically a boat that went from Playa del Carmen over to the island. That's where that bomb went off. This kid that shot up the school that I've alleged is tied to ELN was right here. Look at this all now in the context of what we've just told you. The armed forces of Venezuela have been put on alert. The ELN has cut Colombia in two. We've covered that in another video. 3,000 surface-to-air missiles. Russian, up here. Tanks, here. Another video we covered. 2 Russian Navy frigates, here. Terrorist attack, here. Admiral Tidd himself saying radicalization for sure here. Tu-160 Russian backfire bombers, here. Some people said it was blackjack. It's blackjack or either way. Tu-160 nuclear-capable bombers in Venezuela. Military incursions from Venezuela into Colombia. Documented, proven. 2 of them within the last year. How many more signs need to be ignored by the mainstream media that war is coming? And I'm going to ask you folks a question. Let's say that you are just a normal guy who owns a shipping company and you are shipping goods through the Panama Canal from somewhere, let's say Asia or Europe, to the United States. And all of a sudden all hell breaks loose down here after these elections. What do you think is going to happen to the desire to ship things through the canal at the time? Or the insurance rates for such things? If all of a sudden we have rounds flying back and forth between our forces and their forces, however that shakes itself out. It is going to cause a nightmare in the United States financially like no other. The operation of that canal is critical. There is really no more critical piece of infrastructure than that canal. There's a problem with the canal. There's a risk to the canal. There's a risk to the shipping to the canal, which we've pretty much just shown. Already, it could be alleged that exists at the moment. What do you think is going to happen to the price of anything? You know, a lot of people like to watch those shows about apocalypse type of things, Walking Dead, you know, where it's the end of society, and they, you know, base a lot of their prepping on that. You know, they base a lot of their getting ready, the bullets, beans, band-aids thing. But I want you to listen to something. This is a guy, hard-working guy, and I'll leave it with this.
Soy un padre que se me la pasaba por ahí trabajando y conseguía, pero ya no se consigue nada, todo caro. No, el pobre ya no, como que no tuviera derecho pues de comer. Y que tuve que irme a ayudar a bajar una carga ahí en el mercado para que me pagaran con esto. Porque imagínate tú, un kilo de arroz en 120 bolos, una pasta de 200 y pico. ¿Dónde vamos a llegar? No se puede.
El hambre que no lo debe aguantar hambre, que le dé comida.
¿Saben qué van a comer mañana?
Ni idea.
Semana que viene.
This is the medical report for Kimberly's youngest son. He was taken recently to hospital. What it says here is that he was suffering from diarrhea, asthma, anemia, but also from acute malnutrition.
Ahora en la situación yo no sé por qué se ha tardado tanto para vender las cajitas.
¿Qué le dice a los niños cuando piden comida?
Que no hay. Con los nietos, bueno, cuando yo crié los hijos míos, no, porque yo cuando crié los hijos míos se conseguía todo. Había todo en ambulancia y goma, pero ahora en la situación de ahorita con mis nietos que estoy criando, bueno, que estoy ayudando a criar, la situación es dura.
Por ejemplo, un día como hoy, la nevera ¿cómo está? ¿Me la muestro? Plátano y agua. Y yuca. ¿Siempre ha sido así?
No.
This is the sight in many supermarkets, just empty shelves, no food, no food.
Gracias te damos por la familia. Gracias te damos, Señor, por Venezuela.
Ay, mal, porque uno se siente como que está por el suelo. Me toca venir para acá a comer todos los días para que el niño se vaya para el colegio. En esta situación, mi barriga la pasé en esta situación. Ya voy para 2 años en esta situación. Pero cada día se me pone peor. Porque todo está mal claro. Está más difícil de conseguir.
I showed you that because I want you to know what the impetus is going to be for when you hear of tens, if not hundreds of thousands of regular civilians picking up arms and fighting against an invasion, fighting against people that were going to take the little they have from them. They're that desperate down there now. That initial wave of shock that comes when everything falls apart that we always see in these made-for-TV movies and all this other crap, Walking Dead or whatever, that's long past for them. They're now at the point of desperation. And when it comes to your kids, when it comes to your family and the people you love, it won't matter. It will not matter. And they're not going to get into philosophical discussions about socialism or communism or the American way of life or their version. They, like she said, they weren't always like this. 2 or 3 years ago, they weren't always like this. Nothing really changed except for the U.S. sanctions. That's what changed. That's what destroyed that country. I'll leave it there. Like, share, subscribe. We'll see you next time.